Joining us is a man who is no stranger to the Observer. Let me say a pleasant good evening to political analyst Dr. Bishnu Ragoonath. Good evening, sir.
Good evening. Good evening to your listeners.
Always a pleasure to have you on. Before I dive into the Council for Responsible Political Behavior, give me your take on what has transpired since Sunday here as far as our political climate.
Well, basically, it was not unexpected after Sunday's launch of their candidates that the PNM was going to call an election. I mean, it was simply a matter of time. They could not have left it for more than 3 months. They've decided to call it earlier rather than later, and I think it's good for the country. However, the fact of the matter is simply that I would have thought that an incoming prime minister would have wanted to let his ministers settle in and at least show that they are responding to the cries of the population rather than simply go straight into election mode. But of course, we have to take it as it is and we work with what we have.
Now, when we look at the reshuffle, Prime Minister Young said that what he was looking to do was to open a new chapter in national security and in finance when it came to reshuffling, of course, Fitzgerald Hines and Com Imbud.
Well, yeah, it was a new chapter, but of course the page is still blank, and the point about it here is simply that neither Marvin Gonzalez or Vishnu Paul would have the opportunity to start writing on those pages as at this point in time, because, for instance, one could ask the question, we know how terrible the crime situation is. What are we going to be expecting of the new Minister of National Security, who has 5 weeks to prove himself? And more importantly, bearing in mind that he still has to meet with all the various stakeholders and so forth, and he has to get his feet wet into the ministry. So can he really turn around the situation? Can he show any improvement in the security forces dealing with the issues? And if he's unable to do that, well, then we have the government will have to will be hard pressed in convincing the population that this is really a new chapter.
Yeah, I mean, again, the question has to be asked, if this is a new chapter, it is being read from the same book and the same objectives, but with new characters.
Well, that too, of course, we have not heard from the minister per se as to what is his plans or what were his plans as he moved forward. I mean, he's yet to talk to the population. We know Fitzgerald Hines had come out openly and said it is not his job to ensure citizenry security. We don't know whether this minister has the same philosophy and what he's going to do. He has not spoken to the population. The population is still awaiting some word as to exactly what is going to happen, if at all anything is going to happen between now and the 28th of April. We bear in mind too that, for instance, the minister came in under the umbrella of a state of emergency, which is expected to expire in a matter of 2 weeks or less than 2 weeks now. And in that event, he will not have that additional support that he could say that he's using to bring about any significant change in how people view the crime situation, and more importantly in what we're going to be doing to let people regain some degree of comfort and security in their homes. Yeah. So all of these are issues.
Yeah, and I guess you're right, because I mean, we're talking about a change that has some sort of substance to it that the electorate could look upon and say, all right, this makes sense, it's adding up. But you know, when you look at the fact of the matter is that you have a finance minister that is viewed somewhat of a political liability than an asset. You saw the ruling of the Privy Council, the fact that, you know, decisions were made that some were not always in the best interest of the country, the state of the economy, and the list goes on. did Mr. Young want to send Prime Minister Young want to send a strong message when, of course, moving someone like Mr. Imbert, who has more years of political experience than him?
Well, I think he wanted to send a message that he's not necessarily going to simply go along with the concerns as relates to Mr. Imbert. I mean, Mr. Imbert he's not the best liked person in the country. I mean, that's a man who boasts about having raised the price of gas 3 times and nobody arrived yet, and he did so with a laugh after it. So that's the kind of thinking that, and more importantly, when we heard in the Privy Council the fact that he should have been the one who was being also investigated, and he was taking the matter to the Privy Council, in a way wasting the taxpayers' money. So I think Mr. Young was trying to, Prime Minister Young was, in making that change, was trying to send a message, well, look, I am going to try and do things differently. I am going to try and protect the public purse and so on. But I am not sure that is the message that is actually going out. I mean, people have now started on the reverse of it and say, well, he was just there for his own interest. And once he has served a day as the Prime Minister, he's entitled to $87,000 a month for the rest of his life. And he doesn't really care about the country or the citizenry. So those are the kinds of things that he will have to deal with as he goes into an election campaign. And how he's going to respond to that, we'll wait and see.
You have, of course, the newly appointed Finance Minister, Mr. Vishnu Paul, who is no stranger to the Ministry of Finance, served in capacity in the past as Permanent Secretary and one of the top financial advisors. And he said that his tenure will not bring financial hardship to the people of Trinidad and Tobago. And upon hearing something like that, one would have hoped that he would have expanded to the fact that, does this mean that property tax is off the table, raising of utility, a hike in utility rates is also off the table? Because the question has to be asked, I mean, what different can he do if the resources are not there? Is he going to be able to find what Mr. Imbert couldn't find? Or were we just placed under these measures based because it was some political internal wrangling?
Well, let's put it like this. Mr. Danforth made a very correct statement. I can't disagree with him that there's going to be no additional hardship under his tenure. His tenure is a mere month and a mere 6 weeks.
True.
So clearly, he cannot do anything that, and without a parliament in place, there can be no new taxes, there can be nothing new. So for the rest of the term, absolutely nothing could change. And until the election, nothing will change. So I don't expect that like I said, it's a correct statement. There will be no additional hardships under him. Whatever this population is suffering now will have to continue until we pass the election date and see who's the new government. And if he retains the position as Minister of Finance, should the PNM win.
Now, many of these social ills have been basically compounded for the last 9 years. I mean, you talk about crime, you talk about the stagnation of the economy and all of these things. In this short space of time, I mean, what can the electorate expect going into this general election?
Well, I don't think the electorate is expecting much. I mean, I know for a fact that in some areas, public works infrastructural works are being done. I was told, for instance, in some parts of central Trinidad, they're doing road paving and painting roads and white lines and so on. Well, I mean, that is as much as they could do. There isn't much more that they could do as at this point in time. We're going to go into party mode in terms of how the campaign is going to be carried out. I am not sure that we're going to get any of the serious issues treated with, because the government itself is not aware or doesn't have any firm footing as to how they're going to turn around the economy. I mean, the last statement Keith Rowley made um, regarding our gas supply suggested that all our eggs were not in the same basket, but nobody have heard any conversations that they've had with Suriname or Guyana to say that we were going to get gas from those countries. All the emphasis was on dragon gas and so on. So the big question here, for instance, the economy cannot continue the way it is on the basis of being an oil and gas economy. We needed to get into that issue of diversification, and I could vividly remember Keith Rowley standing up on a platform, I think in 2020, and all they want is diversification. But we have had none of that, and that is where our problem lies. I would like to hear what economic policies this government is going to be, the PNM is going to be proposing as they go into their election, and how are we going to do this? I mean, I don't know if you recall, but in 2020 I heard we're going to open a plywood factory and something else.
Sandals, which the former Prime Minister said he believes it's going to be coming back. There's some interest there with the Sandals Resort. It's an international brand. What else do we have to look forward to? And that's why I have to ask, on Monday night at one of the UNC Cottage meetings, the opposition leader said that TNT was sold by Rowley to Young's family financiers. Is this more geared towards big business rather than what the nation or the citizens have not been able to receive for the past 9 years?
Well, let's put it like this. There's that common perception. In fact, I would tell you that earlier this week, chatting with a medical practitioner who told me, and he's neither white nor black. Neither Indian nor black. And he made it quite clear. He says, this government has always been and continues to be putting the priorities on the 1% and letting them let the rich get richer and the poor get poorer. So he doesn't expect any significant change should the PNM continue in office, because they're not doing anything that is taking the country to some other place where we need to go in order that we have more equitable development. And it's unfortunate, but that is the view of some professionals who are neither black nor Indian. And I emphasize that simply to say that there's that perception that the 1%, whatever the 1% is not necessarily reflective of the majority of the population.
Yeah, when you look at the fact that Prime Minister Young recused himself from cabinet meetings 137 times, 137 times, because that would be a conflict of interest based on the business that is being discussed. So then again, how much of this and decision making is going to be done in the interest or even the perception that the average electorate is saying, listen, is any of these programs or policies that are being talked about, will they ever come to fruition that is going to benefit myself and generations to come?
Well, let me just say, as an academic, I mean, the fact of recusing yourself from a meeting that is going to be taking decisions that impacts upon your family is something that we should all applaud. Unfortunately, the way our politics operate, everyone knows, for instance, that if the Stuart Young who is going to recuse himself, who are the other people in that room who are making those decisions? And I would probably put my head on a block and say, 99.9% of the times, once they know his Young's family support it, and when he walks back in the room, of course, he had recused himself. He was not part of the decision. I mean, and we've heard it and we've seen it. It goes beyond that, and and this was most reflective when we had the challenge with in January of this year, when Keith Rowley came back from Tobago and says, I want Young as the incoming Prime Minister.
Right.
And there was this uproar. But then what happened? As soon as the Prime Minister, then political leader, put down his foot, everybody else cowered and supported the proposal to have Mr. Young there. So there was not going to be any dissension amongst the ranks. That doesn't mean to say it doesn't exist. But the point about it is that they knew where their bread is buttered, and they had to go that. So I don't expect, and like I say, while I would applaud the fact that Minister Young may have recused himself, I strongly believe that once he did so, the entire cabinet were his friends, and they would simply go along with whatever decision they knew that would be in his best interest, not necessarily in the best interest of the country.
Yeah, but that's just it. I mean, again, a lot of these things have been played out so boldly, so confidently, that it makes you wonder, is it that the administration believes that there's no political price to pay, there are no consequences? I mean, think about it. As part of the electorate, you're looking on and you're saying to yourself, my God, these people are fixing their business. They're making sure that their bread is buttered, that of their friends, their family, their finances. And time again, they recuse themselves because it has been in their interest. Taking all of that in consideration, this does give someone the motivation to get up on April 28th and say, I have had enough of this. Have they considered the consequences?
Well, let's put it that way. What are the consequences? If I'm to ask that question, what are the consequences?
To be voted out.
To be voted out? Well, that's all right. I already get my $87,000 a month for the rest of my life. And I could always come back later on and see whether I could get back into Parliament. Because definitely I know that I am in Port of Spain North, and there's a strong PNM, there's a PNM stronghold. I can win my seat. So I will continue to get my salary as a MP. I may not be in government. And I told people when Keith Rowley said that he was going to retire from as political leader and Prime Minister. And I said, at that point in time, I was saying, you really think Keith Rowley would want to return to the Parliament as a member of the opposition should the PNM lose? No, he wouldn't want to do that. So it's better if I take it. I mean, I already getting my pension. Let me go my way. I don't have to embarrass myself and sit in the Parliament on the opposition benches, right? The younger people may very well say, well, we'll ride it out. But like I said, the consequences are there. And beyond, what are the consequences? When I asked what were the consequences, yes, the PNM could lose the election, but end the business done fixed with their financiers and their private sector colleagues and whoever else. And if it means staying out of government for 5 years or 10 years, as the case might be, then so be it. But they are not going to be directly affected, All of those members of Parliament are not going to be directly affected should the PNM win or lose. I mean, yes, they'll be directly affected. They wouldn't get a ministerial salary. But beyond the ministerial salary, that is as much as how they're going to be impacted. It is we, the citizenry, who have faced the brunt of the impact over the years, and we will continue to face it until such time as some policies are put in place to make Trinidad and Tobago, or to advance the state of economic development in Trinidad and Tobago.
All right. Let me ask you about the Council for Responsible Political Behavior, where, of course, you are the chair for that. The council monitors the election campaign period, primarily through public complaints or reported breaches of the code, and invites the public to collaborate with the council by submitting reports of possible violations to the code. Yeah, but we've always had our own understanding when it comes to our political culture here that what some people may try to define as gutter, it has always been some very hard, stinging political pecan. Tell us what would you say that one has crossed the line when campaigning?
Okay, so we need to kind of we know that a part of our culture is pecan, and that is not something that you want to take away. But and you want to develop it, but you want to ensure that the campaign is conducted in a manner that allows a degree of ethics and principles and values and so on. So, for instance, and here, if I may go back to Prime Minister Young, he is going to be running as a candidate. He's going to be contesting an election.
Right.
We know him. We could focus our attention on him. Now, clearly, he has not operated in a vacuum. But the fact of the matter is simply, we don't need to bring in Stuart Young's father and mother into the campaign and try to assassinate their character and so forth. They are not directly part and parcel of the campaign. Let us keep the campaign as clean as we can in the context of saying, forget the character assassinations. Let us focus on policy. Let us focus on what are they presenting? What are they hoping to achieve? Let us focus on those things. Now, within the campaign, for instance, there's always that concern. We live in a multiracial society. It's easy to incite racial hatred and so forth. We need to be able to say there are lines that we should not cross. So don't cross a line that says that you are now trying to encourage racial hatred, racial overtones into the campaign. Let us keep it as clean as possible. Now, all of this tells us simply that, there are certain things that we should try to do. But the point about it, we know that the politicians sometimes get carried away on the platform and would say things that they don't necessarily mean, or they don't. But the fact of the matter is simply, when you say certain things, that could probably lead to other kinds of configurations and interpretations, and that is what we are hoping that our politicians take on board. So, for instance, today I was on another program with a media house, and I was surprised that the moderator of that program was telling me about things that had happened on both sides of the political fence since 2015, 2020, and he says both parties are guilty. And I said, yes, we tend to want to focus, and we have to ask them now to rethink and review how they go about what they say. In 2023, we all know, or we should all remember, that the council came under severe tongue lashing from the Prime Minister. Why? Because we had cited the Prime Minister as having crossed the line on more than one occasion. So why you want to go and say that drunkard woman and them kind of thing? And everybody know who you're talking about, and that is the kind of character assassination that we think you could leave it out. Okay? You could say it you could say some of the things you want to say in a less violent
and vulgar
manner.
Yeah.
And that is basically what we are asking for. And in fact, once we had cited the Prime Minister for some of those statements, he came out and he attacked me and the council. And it was only when I think all three daily newspapers wrote editorials at the PNM says, well, we're not dropping out of the council, we simply register a protest because we feel all they're targeting us. Now, mind you, and I am happy that when we started this segment, you read part of the thing that says the council deliberates on complaints that the population may have submitted. Bear in mind, we are 8 members on the council. We can't be everywhere at the same time. We can't listen to every political thing. And it is the members of the population, the citizenry, who would write to us, send us an email. Now they could WhatsApp us and send us a message and say, this has been said or that has been said. And we think that it is crossing the line in terms of trying to keep our electoral process at a certain level of integrity and ethical behavior and so on. And that is all that we do. And now we will take those complaints, and those are what we're going to deal with. I mean, if I may use the examples to illustrate, in 2023, believe it or not, Gary Griffith came to the council and complained, not about something that was happening to him, but about statements which were being made against the PNM and against Keith Rowley, because he felt it was going below that level that we should have in our country. And I say this, and I'm very happy that Gary Griffith would have taken that position. I will always remember, for instance, way back in 2015 when we had the council for the first time, and Ferdy Ferreira was sitting on the council, and Ferdy would be the first man to come in to a council meeting and say, my party has done wrong. And that's the kind of mature thinking that we want, and that we are hoping that it will spread across the country, where parties would now say certain things. Again, if I may use the example from 2015, we cited Rudal Munilal for something that he would have said. And the next meeting that Rudal Munilal took the platform to, he started his speech by saying, I have been censured by the council, so you know what, I'm going to try and see whether I can keep my presentation tonight within bounds. Now, whether he did it or not, that's not the point. The point about it is that they recognize.
Yeah, he acknowledged him.
And that they acknowledge that things were not the way it should be. And that's the kind of mature thinking that we want from our politicians.
All right.
If I may use Keith Rowley's word, we don't want nobody to go and willy and do whatever they want to say and
I think that's putting it as clean as possible. I want to thank you so much again. Any closing comments? Go right ahead.
Well, basically, we have put out a WhatsApp number. We are encouraging the population. The campaign has started, so of course we have to start monitoring. And we are encouraging the population, please let us know what are their concerns so that we could let the parties know when the citizenry are telling them they are not observing the code that they should.
All right. And that WhatsApp number, folks, is 793-4505. Again, 793-4505. Thank you so much again, Dr. Bishnu. Raghunath, again for your input, and best of luck to you and the entire council.
Thank you. It's been my pleasure.
Thank you so
Bye.
much.